It should turn there. Okay, we are good to go. Sorry about that.
Okay, for those of you just tuning in, I convened the Plan Commission. We will officially reconvene at 6:32 after technical difficulties. All members are present this evening, which I appreciate. Thank you in advance for your time, talent, and patience as we conduct business. Item 2, approval of October 24th, 2023 Plan Commission meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you. Motion to approve by Commissioner or Trustee Kudo, seconded by Commissioner Wickland. Any discussion? I heard there was a minor typo that will be emailed. It's not substantive in nature. All right, all those in favor of adopting the October Plan Commission meeting minutes as presented with that typo corrected, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 3. We have consideration of a parking special exception to eliminate off-street parking requirements for 4 household living units at 4044 North Oakland Avenue. We will have Director Grubentrag provide an overview of the application, followed by public comment, followed by public Plan Commission deliberation. As you will notice in reviewing the materials for this evening, item 3 and 4 are related, although we will take them up separately and consider them separately. So with that, I will pass it over to Director Grubentrag for 3A overview.
Thank you, President McKeag. So as President McKeag mentioned, I just have a brief overview explaining the memo that's in the packet. So if you've read the packet, this will be repetitive, but for those who have not read the packet, this will just be a brief introduction to what our discussion relates to tonight. So on the agenda, we have a request for a parking special exception at 4044 North Oakland Avenue. It is a mixed-use building currently occupied by Camp Bar on the lower level and 4 residential units above. The application is to eliminate the off-street parking requirements for the 4 household living units above. The current village requirement is 1 parking space per each unit, so a total of 4 spaces are currently required. Those spaces are also required to be enclosed under the current code. The parking on this site is currently satisfied by having the garage and driveway, of which 4 cars can fit in whatever configuration they so choose. The commercial space currently does not require off-street parking because it is less than the 2,500 square foot threshold that is identified in the code. So the commercial tenant currently does not require parking, but the 4 upstairs living units do. The applicant has indicated on the application that the spaces are not currently being utilized by those upstairs living units. He indicates that on-street parking is available and the property is located on a transit line. He also notes that on-street parking permits are available for purchase and he would be willing to purchase them if necessary. If approved, he would repurpose the parking spaces for outdoor dining, which is under item 4 of our agenda tonight, and he would no longer seek use of a parklet, which would free up on-street parking from the months of March 15th through November 15th. With respect to comments, parking requirements were updated by the village board upon recommendation of the Plan Commission in 2021, at which point they were reduced from 1.75 per unit to 1 to 1 per unit. Within that discussion, it was noted the actual or historical ratio was found to be 0.34 to 1. So we had many apartment buildings built, pre-war or World War II era, in which parking was not provided with the same level of quantity as it was later on. So the actual level, when averaged out, was lower than 1 to 1. With respect to neighboring mixed-use buildings, 4000 and 4010 Oakland Avenue have no off-street parking. 4001 and 4041 Oakland have off-street parking as a result of the redevelopment and the redevelopment agreement for the Light Horse, in which underground parking was developed for the Light Horse building itself, and a public parking ramp was constructed with an agreement to allow parking for the tenants of 4001 North Oakland Avenue. The neighboring multi-unit building, which is not mixed use, at 1801 and 1807 Jarvis and 1800 and 1806 have no off-street parking. However, the buildings at 1804 Elmdale has 6 stalls for 7 units, and the building at 1805 Elmdale has 6 stalls for 6 units. These are just the neighboring residential and mixed-use buildings within the area, but obviously there's many examples throughout the village to reference. Monthly on-street parking is now available by a permit. That did not used to be the case, but approximately 4 years ago that was made available, and people are utilizing that for on-street parking, weather and winter restrictions permitted. We did receive one letter of opposition, which was primarily relating to item 4, but I think both of these kind of go together. And then we did receive 5 letters of support for the project, 3 of which were in the packet because they were provided prior to 3 p.m. On Monday, and 2 of which were received this morning, of which I will read into the record when we get to public comment. Review and approval. This is perhaps too small for many people to see, but it is within the packet. There are A through M considerations that the Plan Commission can choose to discuss or deliberate within their review and approval process for tonight's meeting. And so within the packet, the applicant did provide responses to the applicant ones that he felt were relevant. With that, I am completed with the staff overview.
I forgot to make one comment. The applicant this evening is Mr. Paul Hackard. And Paul Hackard did make a campaign donation to my 2021 campaign for village president, which was raised as a concern of conflict of interest at a prior, several years ago at a prior application. So I acknowledge the I acknowledge the receipt of the campaign donation. I've consulted at that time with Attorney Nathan Baer. It is not a conflict of interest. There is no reason for me to recuse myself. And my position is that we work hard to be elected. And once elected, I'm not going to give up my vote as a woman and a resident and a longtime public service unless there is a legal reason for that. So moving on to public comment, 3B. Are there members of the public who would like to be heard this evening on this matter? Please raise your hand once we stop screen share.
Yeah, figure this out.
And you can raise your hand. I will call on you, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you. I'm seeing Heather Lang, and you can share come off mute and turn your camera on if possible. Hi, and say your name and address, please.
Hi, good evening. This is Heather Lang. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm here representing my parents, Tom and Debbie Lang, and we did submit their letter of opposition. So that letter constitutes the full statement. So I just wanted to check if that'll be read into record. That represents our remarks, but I want to confirm that before I yield my time.
We typically, so that statement was received and reviewed as part of the materials for this evening. So it is a matter of public record. It has been posted. And then we don't read into record statements that have been received unless they have not been posted. So if they miss the posting cutoff, then we read them into record. So if it would be your preference for us to read it into record at this time, or if you would like to take your 3 minutes and read that, that would be acceptable.
Okay, great. I don't think I need to read.
From a practical matter, I can ask for a show of hands. Did everyone all members of the commission, did you read the statement? Do you have any questions for Ms. Lang at this time regarding the statements made? Okay,
I say maybe when we get to the discussion of the patio, that would be a good time to.
Well, I think this is the time, if you have questions for Ms. Lang about the statement, you could ask them at this time. Otherwise, you may refer to the statement as, evidence of a position that you want to take. Does that make sense? I'm sorry I'm bungling this a little bit, but I've never had this situation before.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure you had it and it was part of the record. Just to summarize for those that may not have seen it, my parents who are within about 250 feet of 4044 Oakland had raised a number of concerns about nuisance related to noise, potential smoke from the proposed kitchen and the hours of operation. So I don't feel a need to reread their letter, but did want to offer that summary about the concerns of nuisance and the impact of the arcade and the proposed kitchen.
Thank you. Thank you for being here this evening.
Absolutely.
Are there other members of the public who would like to be heard this evening, either in person or virtually? Okay,
Yes, me, and no one else's.
no one else is online, so if you want to come, step to the microphone, name and address, and you have to speak really loudly into it like this. So that we can, yes, we want to hear your cabaret voice.
I'm Deborah Sawchuk. I'm the owner of Eastmore Real Estate. I'm a significant landlord in Shorewood, and I've known Paul for years. And I'm very familiar with the way he runs his business. I've been in all of his businesses. And I own the building at 1804 East Elmdale Court, which is the building that's directly adjacent to this, the 7-unit building. And I'm not objecting to this at all. I'm in favor of it. I think it will enhance the neighborhood and it will enhance his business. And I have really no concerns. My management company has no concerns. So, and I'm sure all my tenants are gonna love it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great, Director Creepertime, would you like to read what we've received?
Yeah, I did receive 2 additional comments, like I said, after the deadline, so I'll just read them quickly. The first one is from Jamie Reeve of 2018 East Lake Bluff Boulevard. I know the commission is voting soon on the Camp Bar proposal. I'm writing in support of Camp and its owner, Paul Hackbarth. Since Camp arrived in Shorewood 11 years ago, they've been a great addition to our village. It's proven wildly successful as a bar and a brand. Paul and his team have additional sites in neighboring communities, not an easy lift, especially when you consider the pandemic. Additionally, Paul and his camp team have spawned lots of community events like outdoor Packer games for hundreds to watch in Oakland when closed down. They led the on-street, off-sidewalk parklet movement. They've generously donated to community fundraisers and have hosted a few golf outings, raising thousands of dollars for deserving nonprofits, including our very own Shorewood Foundation. Through it all, Paul has proven to be a great businessman and community member. He's responsible and visionary. I think the idea for a backyard spot makes a lot of sense. Cloud Red does something similar already. I'm sure Paul will put his own spin on it, but another winning idea in addition to Shorewood for residents and visitors alike. Once again, that was Jamie Reeve of 2018 East Lake Bluff Boulevard. The next one comes from Melissa Barclay. I did ask for her address, but I could not get a response in time, so just take that for what it's worth. Hi, Bart. I'm writing to you in regard to Camp Bar and owner Paul Hackbarth seeking approval to establish outdoor seating / food area behind Camp Shorewood. I've been a Shorewood resident for the past 6 years, and the camp establishment is a great asset to our small village. I think Paul's plan to revamp the back parking area and garage spaces into fire pits and outdoor dining would be a welcome addition to the community. I'm in favor of this taking place. Thanks for your time, Melissa Barclay.
Just right across the street from the 1804, which is abutting the property. And I can just say as a resident that I don't have, my bedroom actually overlooks the parking lot behind Broad House. And so I hear all the, when they take the glass out at 3 a.m. or whatever, and the guy that comes to get aluminum cans out of the dumpster afterwards and all of that stuff. And I can smell smoke when the staff are taking breaks in the, if my windows are open. And I definitely, there are days in the summertime when I don't have a fan in the window or I don't have my AC unit going that I can hear people at the businesses, but I actually love that sound. And none of my neighbors ever complain about it, even when they're, the street is closed down and there's like a festival during the day or something like that. So I don't think I have a conflict of interest. I can just speak from being a resident in the area that the vibrancy of the businesses and the people coming and going from the in and out of the neighborhood, whether by car, bus, using the shuttles, whatever it is, parking, is just adds a vibrancy and activity that I really like and kind of drew me to the area. And also the, parking exception, I know that's the item that we're on right now. There is, plenty of parking across the street behind the Walgreens and the parking, and I think that if that ever came to be an issue, all businesses along that, those two blocks can really promote the availability of that parking. Right now, I don't think they need to, but that is always an option. And those, I can say that the units in my building are all 2-bedroom units, and so there's where the units above camp, I believe, are smaller. They're 1-bedroom units, yeah, so even the fact that the, tenants are not using the parking behind your building now, or it hasn't been available to them, or they haven't used it, signifies that that's not really the type of tenant that you're gonna be, you know, drawing in the future. So I don't have any, I just want to make that comment from just a local user. Because I wouldn't use that as a plan commission. Okay, seeing no public, no further public comment, we will close that period and move on to plan commission deliberation. So at this time, I would open it for comments from the plan commission.
We take a motion to,
Yes, I would also entertain a motion.
I move to approve the parking special exception to eliminate off-street parking requirements for household living units at 4044 North Oakland Avenue based on meeting the conditions stated in 535-31G. Second.
All right, motion by Commissioner Woodland, seconded by Commissioner Pollock. Any discussion? Yes, Barbara.
Hi, I have a question for the applicant. The 4 current tenants that you have living above Camp Bar, you said they're not using the parking space available in the back at the moment. Are they parking elsewhere or do they not own vehicles?
It's a mixture of both.
Uh-huh.
I have a long-term agreement with a neighboring landlord where actually for a number of years I did the snow removal for them. And we've just always had this agreement that my tenants can use their parking spaces. So as long as that goes, we're gonna keep doing that. But I also, as Bart had mentioned, you know, if that ever does fall apart, it's on me to provide the parking, and that would be through the village permits.
And you know, this is kind of a weird order of agenda items tonight. And so it's almost like we cart before the horse. So I'm maybe I should say this question, but if you had no desire to put an outdoor eating area in the back, would you still be seeking a parking exception? And if you didn't want to put an outdoor eating area in, would you be looking to convert your garage space to something else? It's one of those, you know, like chicken and egg things. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, the chicken,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think you need to have both to make it happen. And
Uh-huh.
that's whatever order it goes in. I mean, that's probably why it's on the same agenda.
Mhm.
But right now, it's just a piece of asphalt that's not being used. I know there was a picture in the packet. All that's back there is my camp van. And that's all that sits back there, which I would plan to move either to my parking lot in Wauwatosa or a spot out at State Fair. I have plenty of places for that to go. I just think would be a great addition for the community to have some really great green space back there, a place to gather. And just to elaborate on that a little bit, not only am I a business owner in Shorewood, I'm also a resident. So I think this is great for the community as a resident and not just for my business. I think that makes me unique to a lot of other operators in the area because I drop my kids at Atwater in the morning. I then go to my I have office across the street at the atrium, check in at my business store. So I'm very active. But with that being said, there's also other benefits too, where the parklet goes away. You know, parklets are great, but they're not ideal. I think it actually makes it a lot safer for patrons. I always worry about that Walgreens. What if somebody hits the gas instead of the brake and goes, you know, there's just so many things that can happen with these parklets. So I think removing those is a great thing, but just taking asphalt and turning it into a really beautiful space is great for the community. So,
Thanks for being
yeah, I know that's a really long answer to your question.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate the question.
Any other questions or comments?
Again, I don't know if this is related to the parking or the next item, but I just want to say that I think that Camp Bar is just a tremendous asset to Shorewood. And that this creativity in developing the business further with this use also is aligned with what community members would like to see with more community space together. So that's something that we had heard during comprehensive planning process. And so I think there's definite alignment here on a lot of levels.
Let me just say one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And just to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying, we love being a member of the community. 2 weeks ago, we celebrated 11 years here in Shorewood. I still remember the liquor license hearing. I was 27 years old, 28 with no experience, but Shorewood believed in me. And for those of you who have followed the camp story, it's a pretty cool story. But one thing that's really changed is the neighborhood, which is a great thing. When we first opened, it was just Camp Bar, Three Lions was, I think, a year old, and Village Pub was on its way out. Now we're up against a lot of different competition, and we need to stay creative and continue to expand our brand. And I would rather do that within the portfolio that we currently operate versus go pop up another bar somewhere else. My vision now is reinvesting back into what made camp great in the first place with the Shorewood. So I think this is a really great place for us to stay relevant, to provide some competition to beer gardens. I think that's one thing that we're always up against in the bar business. But to provide a place where people can bring their kids and feel comfortable. And if you've ever been to camp on any night of the week, you'll see that is a real thing. We have the game room where the kids hang out. So it's just a really great extension of what we're already doing. So thank you for those comments.
I agree with you, the conversion of parking space, underutilized or unnecessary parking space to gathering space is definitely in alignment with everything that we've heard from the public. Over the past, anytime we've done engagement. All right, so I'm not hearing any other discussion. I'm ready to take a vote on this. And does it need to be a roll call? I forget, it's been so long.
It does not need to be a roll call. I think that's just for resolutions and ordinances.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So moving on to item 4, consideration of a conditional use permit application for outdoor dining at commercial property 4044 North Oakland Avenue. It is the same for a overview for the public comment and for the plan commission deliberation. Turning it over to Director Grusenbach for an overview for A. And again, as Director Grusenbach said, all this information is in our materials, and so everybody has had a chance to review it.
Yes, thank you, President McKeag. So once again, outdoor dining application, conditional use permit for 4044 North Oakland Avenue Camp Bar in the rear of the property. Here's an overview aerial of the image. So as you can see, the bar is on the western edge of the property. The proposed outdoor dining space is in between the bar and an outdoor garage area, which as part of the plans would be converted into additional commercial space. As a reminder, we're here for outdoor dining, so the commercial space within both of those two buildings actually is a permitted use. It's the outdoor dining here that we are here to review tonight. Project/parcel overview, 4044 North Oakland Avenue is zoned MX1, which is the mixed-use storefront district. Eating and drinking establishments and retail sales are permitted uses per table 535-25-1. However, outdoor dining is allowed as an accessory use, subject to conditional use in 535-26F. Here in the lower corner, you'll see just a picture of what the property looked like, I think, last week when I took this for the packet. Proposed operations, once again, camp is an existing bar, which in our code is defined as an eating and drinking place. The proposed hours of operation for the outdoor area specifically are Monday through Thursday, noon to 10 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., and Sunday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Additional 2 to 3 employees would be employed at the property as a result of this expansion. Approximately 30 customers per hour for the total operations were projected within the packet. Outdoor dining is proposed in the rear driveway, which is east once again of the main building itself. This here is an overview of what we're essentially looking at. The specific seating and things of that nature, plantings, et cetera, would be reviewed and approved by the design review board as part of a different application. We are here for the proposed use of this space. So just generally, as you can see here, 2 fire pits, 3 tables, chairs in various locations, lighting, an enclosed dumpster enclosure and fence along the building to hide kind of the utility area of the space, and then some landscaping to buffer it from the neighboring multi-tenant building to the south. To the north, there's no buffering, but there is just bricked-in windows at this place, at this location. So I'm guessing the applicant did not think the buffering was as necessary in that location. Once again, here's a picture looking to the south towards the multi-tenant building. As I mentioned, the dumpsters would be enclosed as a result of this application. This is looking to the north, which once again, you can see the bricked in windows there. And even so, at night, the building is vacant with commercial tenants, I believe. And then just looking back towards the west, here's a photo of the current space. Once again, most of the utility area and dumpsters would be screened by fencing for the patron experience. This is an overview of the zoning of the property. So to the north is an MX district, to the south and to the east is an RX district. So notably, this property does not directly abut the residential district or R. It is a residential use to the south that is acknowledged, but the district itself is RX, not residential as in single family or duplex. As noted in the application, staff has no necessary objections to the consideration by the Plan Commission of the application. The police department was consulted with respect to current operations, and there were only 5 cases of disorderly activity within the past 2 years. A similar application was reviewed for Foxhole at 4144 North Oakland Avenue on October 26, 2023. So our last meeting, as you will recall, a public notice was issued. A neighboring notice was sent to mailing. A neighboring mailing was sent within 250 feet of the property. Once again, 1 letter of opposition and 5 letters of support were received. It's the same kind of letters that we discussed in last meeting. They kind of match together. So I just put them in the packet together. With respect to outdoor dining, the code does have specific review and approval standards for outdoor dining. So within the code, the use specific conditions, outdoor dining is allowed on any lot with approval of conditional use permit 535-31F, subject to the following. I've highlighted the ones in red that are relevant. So outdoor dining is allowed as an accessory use to an eating and drinking place or event venue. As the principal use, this property does qualify as an eating and drinking place. The outdoor dining may be allowed on any rooftop. He's not seeking that. Ground level outdoor dining decks, patios, or terraces may not occupy the space designed for any buffer required by 535-24. It does not, that relates to the front of the property, so it's not applicable here as well. A side and rear buffer per 535-24G may be required as a condition of the permit. In 535-24G, there's a table that says that buffer is required when it abuts an R district. Once again, this does not abut an R district, it abuts an RX and an MX. Outdoor dining is not limited to a maximum area of the lot, but any paving areas are subject to the maximum site coverage. The area is already paved, and so it's not seeking new pavement. This one is relevant. Outdoor dining may be required to be closed by 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and midnight on Friday and Saturday as a condition of the permit. He's actually seeking permission within those timeframes. However, it does say other hours of operation may be applied as conditions by the Plan Commission, so that is up for your deliberation. And then lastly, temporary outdoor dining located in the street right of way is subject to approval of a special privilege permit. That relates to things like parklets and outdoor dining in the front of the property. It's not applicable necessarily to this application. The general requirements of a conditional use permit are also up for consideration. So 535-31F5E. The standard 7 conditions are listed there as well as in your packet. And that is the end of the staff overview. Stop sharing the screen.
Thank you. Do we need any clarifying questions or technical questions? Yes.
Just a couple of the notice that it went out to the residents within 250 feet, like in the apartment building, just to the south of that page area. Did that just go to the owner of the building or also to each tenant?
It goes to property owners, correct? So not to individual
So we
tenants.
don't know whether the people that would be overlooking, we don't know if they got that.
I would assume they didn't because it just gets mailed to the property owner. If the property owner shares it with them, that's how they would get it. It is also published in the newspaper, but to your point, we do not specifically mail it to individual units.
And then, so you see my ruler trying to figure out the diagram to figure out, okay, it looked like where the patio starts, the seating was like 20 feet away from the back of the building. And then from like maybe the patio to the back of the garage, about 50 feet, but yeah, it's my country. So I just wasn't sure, like what is the length of that proposed patio and the width, I mean, just to get a feel for this space that we're looking at.
I don't know the exact dimensions of it, but what I can speak to is at the atrium, we have about the Anderson building, I believe it's called. We about that building, and we actually do wedding ceremonies up there, cocktail hour. So, and that's a lot bigger building than the one in Elmdale. So we definitely have a lot of experience working with apartments. But with that being said, that's also why I did request times less than what's allowed. So I also do want to be a good neighbor. I don't want to push the envelope. I don't want to have angry neighbors. We've been around for 11 years now, and I'd say all of our neighbors were in really great standings.
And from step out the window.
No, not purposely at least. But I also like to point to our other properties too, Camp Barn and Wauwatosa, our back patio. It basically goes right up to the alley and then it's all residential. And we have the same rules there. It's, easiest way to remember, it's 10 o'clock on school nights, 11 o'clock on weekends. And that's how we've always operated the hours of our patio. So music off, TVs off, et cetera, everyone inside. So we're very used to operating outdoor space close to residential units. I mean, this is a very dense village. There is going to be, of course, you need a little bit more noise, but it's not going to be, I don't think, any sort of nuisance in any sort of way.
Yeah, because I mean, it's, when we make decisions, it's not a matter of I love to fire or I don't like it, or I'd love to be on the patio, but we just have to go by what, you know, regulations, no ordinances.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it's any different than having 40 people out front on the parking with the apartment building across the street. It's just, I get it. And I'd like to work with Deb and Doug and we've seen variances in the past, like in Tulsa, we have 8-foot fences instead of 6, and that's purposeful to keep, you know, to create that noise barrier, which is nice. So those are things that we can address as we go through design review board and stuff like that. But those are all things I think, some water features for white noise. Those are all things that we're gonna be working in this project.
Now, this next question might be for Barb. So just to be clear, the exception that you're asking us to review is just for the outdoor dining patio space. It's not for conversion of any of the garage space, correct?
Correct. Inside the building, that's a permitted use as an eating and drinking place, as I mentioned. So the code specifies that outdoor dining is a conditional use, but within the MX district, an eating and drinking place is a permitted use. So the conversion of any of that space is simply subject to building permits.
Down in the basement. That doesn't sound good, but it's in a lower level. But we have a very limited menu of pizzas, appetizers, stuff like that.
Okay.
So when you look at the proposed drawing, the initial drawing, it does show a potential kitchen use. I think it'd be great. We're good at what we're good at, and we usually work with other companies, like for example, Cranky House and Wauwatosa makes our pizzas fresh, and then we cook them in house. And that's what I'd be looking for in summer. Partner with another food partner to do something really cool and creative to draw people out there, but then partner with other businesses. It'd be great to find a local one to work with too. So
Yeah.
those are all things to come.
One of the issues that were raised by the Langs, whose letter was included in our packet, I think was, you know, besides noise level, was odors from a possible outdoor kitchen. And earlier this year, the village, after almost a year of work, passed a new form-based commercial zoning code. 3 of us commissioners were on a working group for that. And so I think that garage space would be considered an accessory structure on a commercial lot. And we've only approved 4 uses for accessory structures: a drive-through facility, an electric vehicle, you know, charging equipment, fuel pumps, and home occupation. So that's why I kind of asked earlier, okay, if you could not convert that garage into these potential other uses, would you still be interested in having an outdoor eating space? But
I just want to hold it. I feel like we're on the verge of deliberation versus technical questions. So
right, so I'm just.
you can finish your questions.
So I just wasn't sure if you were up to date on what's that new code required, because it was confusing, you know, to have it in the diagram.
Sure.
And then not be real clear what we're approving. We're just approving the outdoor.
Yeah, so it's a conditional use for outdoor, so that would be a great discussion. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
All right, thanks for making that distinction. All right, I'd like to move on to public comment at this time. There are people on the virtual setting who would like to be heard on this matter. Please raise your hand. And this is pertaining to the conditional use permit. Ms. Lang.
Hi again. This is covered in my dad's letter. I just wanted to reiterate, I heard the discussion about the hours of operation and do appreciate the focus on being a good neighbor. Just want to reiterate that that is, I believe, my dad had added it up, like 75 hours a week of proposed outdoor space. My parents are senior citizens. I'm a 1992 graduate of Shorewood High School, and their house was built in 1920. So that house really readily has sound that carries in, particularly on the second floor where their bedrooms are. And while I completely appreciate another perspective and the fact that some might enjoy sort of a lively environment, my parents absolutely do not have any excitement about having that kind of noise that late in the evening. So I really do just want to stress that for my parents who are senior citizens and 37-year residents in that house, as well as in the community of Shorewood, that they're very worried about this nuisance. They're very sensitive to sound. I understand. I'm hearing, I think that the kitchen might be sort of something else that's not part of this right now. But I don't want this commission to take lightly their concerns about noise, and that noise being produced, even if it may be reasonable to some, constituting a nuisance as you find them at their age and in that house.
Thank you. I believe we have trustee Stokebrand, who's next in line.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would just like to say that I see progress for Shorewood moving forward with transparency, accountability, and oversight with President McCaig's statement about taking a campaign donation from Paul Hackbarth. We're moving in the right direction with this kind of a statement. And I think although the legal threshold for conflict of interest may not be met, I guess we all have different thresholds ethically, and the potential for a conflict of interest is certainly significant for me, but I am cheered by the progress we're making here with the statement. I just want to say, as someone who sat through hours and hours of commercial district updating, there were so many of us that sat there and really thought through all the different regulations. I mean, they're really regulations, right? Trying to think what would work best for this community. And a lot of time and effort was spent, and Director Griepentrag worked with us, and we came up with what we thought was reasonable for the community. And so my question becomes, if we keep, what's the difference from before we passed the commercial zone update, and here we are now chipping away at the commercial zone update? Help me understand how we've come forward with this request. What does this do to the village moving forward after there was a lot of emphasis on the process? What does this do to the process when we start to chip away? And I appreciate everything, again, to everyone who worked on that commercial zoning update. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take that as rhetorical.
I could also, if it's okay
Okay.
or not.
Trustee Stokebrand, did you want, was that a literal question about what does it mean to?
It was literal. Yes, it was
Okay.
literal.
So, yeah, so because we still have conditional uses as a result of the updated code, so perhaps Director Griepentrag could comment on that.
Yeah, I actually see this as a step forward, because prior to the update of the commercial zoning code, this language was hidden in the food chapter. And as a result of it being hidden, it was not caught when Cloud Red applied for outdoor dining, nor was it caught for, I think, many other applications. So within the commercial zoning update, we actually moved all zoning regulations into the zoning chapter. So it's a lot easier for staff to administer, for applicants to understand, for residents to understand. So the requirement of it being a conditional use permit was always there. It just wasn't very clear. So within the process, we didn't change that requirement. We just made it more clear by placing it within the use section of the zoning code. So I don't see this as chipping away at anything. That may have been a comment related to parking exception that was granted in the previous agenda item. But once again, that was also not taken with the commercial zoning update. Parking was taken prior to the commercial zoning update. So I don't see either of these applications lessening the work that was performed in those two activities. So that's just my comment. Outdoor dining has always been a conditional use permit. It's actually much more clear now to me, applicants and residents, because it's located in the proper place as opposed to being hidden in the food safety chapter.
Commission deliberation, is there a motion? Trustee Kudo? Okay,
Sorry,
I was gonna say you might beat me to it. That's great.
I move to approve the conditional use permit application for outdoor dining at commercial property 4044 North Oakland Avenue. Based on meeting conditions stipulated in section 535-31.
Second that.
No conditions.
I second that then.
you may. So that's a motion by trustee Kudo, seconded by Commissioner Whitman. Deliberation on the part of the commissioners. I'll open it up with saying in direct response to this line, I really appreciate making the distinction that while, excuse me, the experience of living near the businesses may be tolerable for some, it's not tolerable for others. And I did talk to your mother on the phone for a good chunk of time and made the connection that we live in the same neighborhood. And yes, we have very different experiences. And so that is, you do pose a really important question, as do your parents, as to what are the rights of, you know, a property owner at one address versus a property owner at another address. And in my 10 years on the board, and also in this position, I don't have a good answer for that because it has come up in every single decision. So I don't want to say that even though I do plan to support this for all the reasons that have been mentioned earlier today, it is also, I do acknowledge that with every support of an application like this, there is somebody who prefers that we not support it. And so I don't want to see them blocking over that. I guess I would also say that, and maybe this is more public comment, but having now the experience, you know, I've owned 2 homes, single family homes at different areas of the, in the village. I've rented a duplex and now I live in a 6-flat, literally at Oakland and, and Elmdale, a very busy part of the commercial district. And I will say that for people that live in multi-unit buildings, we don't have backyards, we don't have patios, and we don't have porches. And so local businesses that have outdoor spaces that allow friends and neighbors to gather. I know that people in my building, including myself, I see them out entertaining friends all the time in the neighborhood at different places. And it's just a whole lot easier. So when you think about half of our population being tenant renters, and a good chunk of that population living in multi-unit buildings, it does become more of a diversity inclusion effort about how much are we willing to allow people to enjoy their homes and make accommodations for the different lifestyles that people live. And sometimes by choice, sometimes not by choice. So I'm not, so that's just another way of looking at this when we look at the difficulties that people have with sharing space or the challenges that come with different uses of space. Any other comments from the commission? Yes.
Mark had mentioned briefly the report from the police department, which you said you couldn't put in our packet, but you would tell us a bit more about what those complaints were about.
Sure, I can't elaborate much on it. As I mentioned to the plan commissioners, the police department did provide me with a report, but it was unredacted, and so I wasn't able to share it publicly. But you know, it was all calls received either from camp or by people of camp. Within the many calls, the primary call was just the police stopping in as a safety check and kind of things like that. So the primary call is a safety check and or a voluntary safety check, and nothing was ever found. So the majority of visits have always been cordial, if that's the word. There were 5 calls for disorderly conduct, all of them within the building, all of them relating to patrons, interacting with each other, and largely being called by the bar to help, facilitate the removal of a patron who either refuses to leave or should have left. So within the last 2 years, 5 calls the police department identified were of disorderly nature.
Well, that's good to know, because we didn't know, are there other neighbors calling in because of noise or some other reason? So that's helpful. Thank you.
Can I just elaborate on that? Am I allowed to?
I will allow it. We're not gonna get into in general, I'm not gonna
No,
allow
I
it.
just want to state, and again, the report's redacted, but these days, my staff, even if there's just a disagreement, we encourage them to utilize the police, just because you don't know how people are gonna react these days. It's just the way that we do our business. But what I can speak to is in 11 years of operating, we've never been cited for no noise nuisance or anything. We always operate within the approach. So that's definitely something we're being fun.
That's my question about the noise aspect of this. Wouldn't the business have to fall within the noise ordinances of the village anyway? So I feel like that's an issue that this group doesn't need to debate and, right.
Yeah, it's self-limiting in the sense that it was similar to the Foxhole application that we considered. And it applies to any other business that has an outdoor seating or indoor seating for that matter, and music that can be heard, so. Yes,
I believe Ms. Lang might have re-raised her hand. Is that correct? If you're willing to.
okay, I will allow a brief response.
Yes, I did. Thanks so much for noticing. Probably just 2 comments in response to some of this recent data. I think as an observer here, it would be an understanding I'm not voting. It would be useful relative to those data points about the number of calls to the law enforcement to have perhaps an average. It would also, I think, be useful to have a longer period of time understanding the importance of recency. We are only just coming out of a national public health emergency, the COVID-19 public health emergency, not concluded until May of 2023. So to go back 2 years doesn't dig back to sort of the darkest times of the COVID-19 pandemic, but still really does capture a period in which I think a lot of Americans were not really fully out and about, if you will, for fear of the ongoing public health emergency. So just 2 comments I wanted to introduce into the record there. Thanks.
Appreciate it. All right, and I do see, trustee Joker, your hand. All right, so trustee Kudo,
I'd like to call the question, please.
all right, motion to call a question.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of calling the question? Aye. Any opposed? Nay. All right, motion carries, 6-1 or 5-1? How many? Anyway, motion carries. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, to approve the conditional use permit as presented? Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item. I closed my packet. Item 5, it is a discussion of the revocation process. Can you read I closed my packet by accident.
Discussion of revocation standards for conditional use permits in 535-31F5K. And I don't really have a slide here other than can I
just
jump into it?
all this.
So at the last meeting, Commissioner Pollock had asked for the commission to review the standards of how the revocation could possibly happen should, a business be found to be operating without standards or as a nuisance. And so I just promised to share, within the code, there is a stipulation for revocation and termination. So it says the plan commission may revoke a conditional use permit and terminate conditional use after a public hearing if any of the following determinations are made. The conditional use has not operated in conformity with the original application or any conditions imposed within the approval. That would, for example, be if we find that Camp Bar is operating until 2 a.m. or Foxhole, whatever, So if it's something as blatant as they're not doing that and they don't comply, that's something that we as staff, can act upon. The next one is the conditional use has had demonstrably negative impact on the surrounding area, local environment, or wildlife habitat. I think this was perhaps the one that was wanting more discussion with respect to how we would enforce that. Within the last meeting, I mentioned that my department would largely rely on the police department to enforce that because we're not here on nights and weekends. And so if there is, loud noises or disturbances happening at night or on the weekend, we would rely on the police department to provide us with substantiated evidence of that occurrence. We do not solely rely on, neighborhood complaints because once again, we're not sure if that's substantiated or not. So we, through experience with Airbnbs and other short-term rentals in the village, have been advised by the village attorney that we need to have substantial evidence before we provide or before we bring anything either to court or for revocation, just because these property owners have obtained some legal right to do this through these approvals. And so the village attorney has advised us as staff that we need to have substantial evidence to do that. And so primarily how we in my department currently do that with things of this nature would be to rely on the police department who is here 24/7 in the village. And so Chief Worth is aware of that. We've had meetings specifically with Airbnbs and short-term rentals, but we can once again bring this to their attention. So if they find that any establishment, is having that they know to contact us so that we can bring that either to you guys or to court, whatever is necessary. Then the last one is the applicant or entity granted the conditional use violates, allows, or suffers the violation of the ordinance of the village of Shorewood, state of Wisconsin, United States on the premises covered by conditional use. So once again, if they're doing larger violations, the police department most likely would be involved with that sort of enforcement. They would then tell me and I would bring it to you for revocation of the conditional use. I think that would be the case, but I do believe that item 2 was more of the discussion point. So I will turn it back over to you, President McKagan. If there's further discussion points, I'd be happy to at least provide my perspective of how this would be enforced if necessary.
Yeah, I'd like to open it up and start with Commissioner Hall.
Just go ahead.
Let's make sure you talk closely.
Thanks for that. So I wanted to bring this topic up because I feel like sometimes we have to constrain our choices because we don't have the ability to see what's going to happen after we approve a conditional use. Unlike when we're pouring concrete for buildings, this is one of those times where we can see how it works. And then we can reconsider to say like, hey, is it having a negative impact? That's my entire discussion on here. I feel like we have this revocation ability for exactly this reason. Like we can grant a conditional use. If it turns out to be negative, then we can take it back. And Airline Director Petronic has an opinion that requires some like really substantial finding of fact. But we just had an entire conditional use granted with just community input. Like we didn't have experts, we didn't have anything super formal. And I was just curious on why we're creating an elevated standard to go through this process, which is in the same chapter that gave us the power to issue a conditional use. And why we couldn't use it to, hey, if you get out of line, we'll reconsider it. That's the gist.
So what you would be,
I think it's litigious though, right? I mean, like if we grant something and then we spend someone spends a bunch of money on something. Okay. Right? And then we revoke it. It's not as easy as that initial conversation we're having.
So what I'm not sure about that. And then
no, he's right, because it's the ownership.
no, it's not. So this is like so I've only read
You're
that.
a lawyer.
No, I'm not. No, I've only read the Wisconsin Plan Commission handbook.
Okay.
It's super fun. And it doesn't seem to suggest that there's a high standard. Matter of fact, it points to the Court of Appeals decision where it said that zoning is not like regulatory taking. So we as the commission have like super power here. And all I'm trying to do is talk about how we continue to do what's good for our community. So we can be more permissive. And again, things are problematic. We can reconsider them rather than having to be super concerned all the time that we're going the wrong way.
And I'm not opposing or arguing at that point. And so if anyone were to believe that something that we've granted is a nuisance, I'd be happy if you contacted me and then we as our department could look into it, but we need to substantiate a complaint. So I can't, and this happened with Airbnbs and with respect to someone's car is parked in the driveway, it's an Airbnb. That could be someone's guest, that could be someone's cousin, it could be some, we were advised, so we had to have, based on the advice of the village attorney who did not want to put the village in a position to have, a countersuit, we were advised that we needed to have some sort of evidence. And so if we find that any of these conditional use permits are being noisy at night, you can, inform me and I can have the police department monitor them. It doesn't have to be a call to them, but it can be, hey, police department or Chief Worth or whoever's in the position at that time, I've received complaints either from the plan commission or from neighboring residents. Can you please just do random checks of that to make sure it's okay? But the village attorney has advised that we do need some level of evidence beyond someone just said something. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room between someone said something and like having a police investigation.
I'd be open to ideas on that because I don't have an answer for you at the moment because someone saying something happens every day in our office, quite honestly. Whether it's, my neighbor's doing this or this is happening, and we can't just assume that's the case. And so we have a code enforcement inspector who goes out there and, looks into things. And so if it's happening during the day, I can use my staff to look into it. If it's happening at night, I would need to have other village staff, which unfortunately, in this case, is the police department. So if there are other ideas of how to monitor this, I'm all ears. And if you have suggestions, if and when it happens, I'm happy to consider them. But just from my perspective, that's how we've operated in the 6 years that I've been here. And, taking things to court is not a easy or fun process. And I wouldn't want to do it without having, enough evidence to proceed.
I agree with what you're saying, by the way, but I'm thinking, forget outdoor patio. Sure. Let's say it's a parking exemption for an apartment building, right? And then all of a sudden we realize that while their residents are parking all over the street and we shouldn't have done that.
Like, no.
Well, no, but that's my question. Is it too late now or what's the process?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I'd love to have the conversation. I think.
By the way, I don't think that's happening, but I'm just using that as an example because it's a higher, like someone built an apartment building, I would say you can't.
Yeah, so I guess my thinking is like, well, if we made a decision that was bad, we know it's a problem, we should try to fix it. And then we can figure it out by going through a process, but it's the public good we're trying to manage. So that's all I'm trying to say.
Just a sort of point of something. I'm gonna continue. I want to hear what everybody has to say, but I also question whether it would be this body that would even consider making a change. It just seems, I could take the input, but I would never, it would be a village board.
I don't think there's a change here. I think what we have is a different interpretation of how K2 applies, because I read this in the same section of review procedures. We just did a review procedure with that conditional use.
Yeah, it's village board precedent. I don't think that it's a disagreement. I wouldn't make any decision here, even if the majority of you said, I agree with Josh.
Yeah.
Due diligence, I would put it through the attorney.
Oh, please.
And that would, so it's that, so I'm just looking for a process. What are you looking for as an outcome here? And I want to make sure that it's within our purview. And then I'm just thinking process.
Sure. So 2 things. I want us to be a really good body that's a steward for the community. We've been, I think, really fantastic in one way, which is expanding the capabilities of unused spaces in the village, right? And we're going to make choices that are not always going to be great. Some of them get poured in concrete. Those are going to be hard to fix, right? Some of them aren't. They're going to be like, hey, we want to give you, if Hackbarth wanted to have his bar stay open later, right? I would have been more concerned with that. He happened to make it easy to say yes. But if we had a revocation process, we could have erred on the side of permissiveness to see what's going on. So that's what I'm trying to get to. I'm gonna stop hammering about it.
Okay, so I saw Craig Miller and then Philip Post.
After our last meeting, I had one of those, darn it, that I should have made an amendment about the hours. Because we were asking about, well, how late can a bar stay open? Like for the music, like how late can they play music? And so yesterday, when I was reading over the sections of the commercial zoning code about, hours and outdoor dining and how you can have in the permit what the hours are limited to. Again, yeah, we didn't really we talked about what the state of Wisconsin allows for bars to be open. We didn't really talk about patios. But to Josh's point, it seems like there should be something in between allowing a permit, passing a permit, approving it, and then revoking it, like amending it. So let's say this outdoor dining space goes in behind campfire, everybody loves it. Some people get a little too rowdy. Do we want to go back and say, okay, you said you were gonna be open till 11? Or maybe the music needs to be lower or something, so it's not off at their heads, where it's just a little more of a friendlier approach that, everybody wants to be a good neighbor. There's that balance between business growth and, residents' happiness, living in a close-knit community that something, not revocation, but like an amendment to the permit or something.
So I think it's a noble goal, and I question how we would tackle it, what the process would look like. And thinking about our role as a quasi judicial body, and hearing what you're talking about, the distinction between us as legislating versus application of the law. We need to make sure that we have standards that are formalized upfront, that we are applying and not getting ourselves into projects or processes where we're continually reviewing our own work. I think that would be problematic for us to go down that road. But perhaps there's a way for us to create something else, some other mechanism, whether it's bringing a concerned land commission recommendation to the village board for review. But I wouldn't want us to be in a continuous loop of redoing our work, so to speak.
Or we want to be in a loop of continuous improvement.
I'd like to hear from the remaining commissioners if you have any comments. Mr. Klein or Trustee Kudo?
I don't have any comments. Like I said, I don't see the concern quite so. We've got some guidelines. We have a planning director that gives us good input. You get feedback at the event, right? Here at the commission from the community, and we make a decision. If someone falls out of that, there's ways to deal with it. I don't think we're applying restrictive things. That's where I'm not really seeing as big of a problem, I guess. We're trying some new things. We're moving. Maybe we're not moving as fast as progress could be, right? And getting creative, but that would require a lot of feedback.
Trustee Kudo?
I get where folks are coming from. I mean, at this point, to me, this is sort of we're looking for a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist, or hasn't existed for us yet. I mean, in an ideal world, sure. But it hasn't happened. I mean, I've known the commission for a while. I don't know, how many years now. And it's never come up before. And I mean, there is a problem. It's not as clean, maybe as some folks would like, but I do understand the position that the village is in as it relates to what Attorney Mayor said, which is you have to have some sort of evidence. If you're going to disrupt folks' lives or their business or whatever it happens to be. And so, it's a balancing act, right? It's difficult at times. And I'm sure there'll be times we get it wrong. But right now, I just, this isn't like a hill I will hurt, not the hill I will die on necessarily, but a fight I'm looking to join. Sorry.
It's a side project. He said we haven't messed up in a long time. That's really great. Thank you.
What was that?
You made a mistake.
Wait till we get to.
Is there a desire to go around again? It's like.
I just want to make a comment that if there are specific areas of interest or projects that we want to take up, we can take them up outside of the conditional use permitting process.
I'm sorry.
Two things.
Okay,
So many of the conditional use permits we give are for very small businesses and they're gone before like a year is up. Some, like that wine club or whatever that was by Harris. So they're not around long enough to cause us any
The
problems.
conditional uses though. It was,
Right, but-
this list, as long as the continued use of the operations,
Yeah.
you don't continue, the conditional use still applies.
The other thing is that we have not only representatives from this body, but a couple trustees and members from every other volunteer committee or board work on that form-based commercial zoning code. And it's relatively new, so I don't think we've really been referring to it enough. And maybe that's something we can do going forward because we've kind of laid out all these guidelines for commercial use. And that should really guide us in the future. Whether it's landscaping or whatever.
how is it not guiding us?
No, I'm saying it's fairly new, so I don't know that we've referred back to it as often, like we did this week. I mean, Bart gave us little, paragraphs of it and I looked those up. But
I will say that was an expected outcome of the process, that we cleaned up the code to allow things that we didn't feel needed to come to us. And so we're not seeing the same level of applications that under the old code we were, because within the process, we said clinics don't come to us. And so a lot of the applications we saw before were for small clinics, et cetera. So those are no longer coming to us. They're still getting permitted. They come to our office, they're permitted uses and they go through. So the goal of the project was to identify which ones you wanted to review. We haven't had a lot of them because we've reduced the number that will come here, but outdoor dining was still one of them. So I think we're definitely using the code.
It's application.
You're just seeing less applications because we've identified that some of those things that were coming to us didn't have to come to us. So I think it's working quite well, quite honestly. The larger component of the code with respect to redevelopment and, setbacks and windows and stuff like that, yeah, that hasn't necessarily come into play because we haven't had a new development proposed, but that's expected as well. So when that happens, that will be triggered. But in the meantime, occupancy reviews are still happening at the same level they were before. It's just that less of them get kicked up to the plan commission for review.
To recap, I'm hearing that there is not a majority of interest to pursue this further. In this realm,
To pursue, in my opinion.
oh,
It was, I think we have a power we have not used. Last session, Bart said, hey, the only way what I heard, the only way I would entertain a revocation was with a police finding. And I said like, hey, I don't think that is the standard at which we have to get evidence that there is a problem with a conditional use be granted.
okay,
So I think it doesn't have to be a ratchet one way.
got it. So I think that, so really, I guess I'm going back to procedure, because if you have, again, maybe it's just my hat, but where I would go with that is, let's get an opinion from the village attorney as to what would happen if we took your scenario, and sort of, did you not to get my attention?
No,
Oh,
I just want to come down. A comment if you'll.
So again, I don't want to shut down any, a legitimate request. It was posed as it's something we should discuss and we can resolve within this group. It doesn't seem like to me there is that sense of resolution. And even if, as I said, even if everyone agreed with you, there's a power that we can use that we haven't used. I would say pause, that's not my experience. And so I would go and get an opinion and come back and sort of use it as a training opportunity. And I'm happy to facilitate that as chair to do that, because I don't want, to your point, I don't want us not to use powers that we have. But I also don't want to act like there are powers that don't come with that, exactly. And so it seems like you're asking, what would it look like if we use that power? And I can get you that information.
I would love it. And can it be more than, can we look at other things other than police reports? And that was the gist.
I would like to clarify that I wasn't meaning that as an absolute, this must happen. It was an off the cuff kind of conversation, and primarily with respect to uses, that's what has been required, and that's largely based on short-term rentals. Largely based because the state statute is very confusing and very difficult to enforce on a local level. So I'm definitely open to all forms of issues to investigate into whatnot. I didn't mean that as an absolute in terms of I will absolutely entertain nothing but a police report, but I'm just telling you that's largely where it ends up going. So
as an opportunity to get educated, because as I said, I'm gonna restate, if there's a power that we can use that we're not using and it's reasonable and, then we should explore that as an organization, as a leadership body. And I can do that, with Director Green and Travi, and I can report back, to the group. How's that sound? Okay. All right, motion to our future, what do we have, anything else? 6?
we have nothing in our office for applications, which I think is good news because your regularly scheduled meeting would be December 26th. And I don't think that any of us necessarily want to have to convene that night. So barring anything else that you guys might want to discuss, there are no applications on file.
Could be a no from.
Yeah, no. Why not?
Motion to adjourn,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
any discussion? We are adjourned at 7:43. Motion by trustee Pluto, seconded by, who was it?
Commissioner Wickland.
All right, thank you for your time, everyone. Happy New Year.